Well, this week was rather eventful. I kind of explained some of it, but there's always stuff going on. But this past week was just crazy, so I didn't have time to come up with something original. But I went back and I found something that I had from years and years and years ago, and I don't know if I ever actually used this material for a sermon or any presentation that I gave. And if I did, hopefully everybody forgot what I said, so it'll all be new. But anyway, this is taken from a sermon from a man named Jeff Williams. He did this in 2003, so he did this 16 years ago. It's been around a long time, but it's very interesting. And the title of it is, and I have it in our program today, The Loch Ness Monster and the Search for God. So this is very interesting, so I hope you enjoy it today, my take on this. And as I was talking to Pastor, and I probably have told you all too, that even if you use someone else's material, it never comes out like they said it, because you always have your own things that you want to say. So, Pastor Williams starts out in the first paragraph, and I think some of you can relate to this. I know I do. But he says, when I was a child, the mysteries of this world fascinated me. I would peer through my junior telescope at the craters on the moon. Does anybody remember the first time they looked through a telescope, maybe not a toy one, maybe a real one, and saw the moon? Yeah. How old were you? Yeah. I was a little girl. I was just a little girl. And my parents, I don't know if they intended to do this or not, but they had me convinced that the moon was made out of Swiss cheese. Anybody ever tell any of you all that the moon was made out of Swiss cheese? And there was a man that lived on the moon. So there was a fellow that my dad worked with, and one dark, dark night, he came to where we lived, and he brought his telescope, which, back at that time was a really big deal, because, it's been a few years since I was 6 years old. So I remember we all had to line up and take turns looking through the telescope, and I'm there trying to find the Swiss cheese and see if there's a man walking around, but it didn't look like what I thought. It was dark and craters, and, it just looked different. But, something in that just kind of rooted in me the fascination with the heavens and the stars and the moon. He continues. He would read endlessly about volcanoes. Volcanoes didn't interest me, but, they might have interested you. And he said he would like to collect fossils from the dried creek bed not far from my house. Okay, who here played in the creek growing up? Yep, a lot. I bet Jack did too. There was a lot of creek dwellers, and I was fascinated with the flow of the water and the rocks, and we would torment crawdads. We would get strings and, put them outside the crawdad hole, and the pincher would come out and, go for the string, and we'd jerk it. But anyway, I think at a young age, plus living out in the country like we did, I was just fascinated with nature. He says, whenever there was a television special about dinosaurs or Bigfoot or the search for Noah's Ark, all of these are mysteries. You could have found me sitting on the floor soaking in every word and image. He didn't mention UFOs, but that's another popular one that people are fascinated with, whether that's scientific, whether it's not. You all might have seen recently in the news, these Navy pilots from years ago are talking about things that they saw. And this is a story that repeats itself over and over, that while they were flying someplace in the Navy jets, there was some sort of object that was just killing it, just flying by, in their jets themselves, and they just couldn't figure out what this thing was. But that sort of mystery just fascinates people, and it does me too. He says, I had even decided someday to travel to Scotland on a hunt for my favorite sea monster. Now, who is that?
Oh, Nessie.
Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. Yep. Since the 6th century, it says. 6th century, that's like the 500s. People have reported seeing a strange creature in Loch Ness in Scotland. Starting in the 1930s, people started taking pictures of images and have shown what appears to be an animal similar to an ancient dinosaur. we've all seen pictures of the Loch Ness. It kind of looks like a brontosaurus, long skinny head and the body hidden. Although most of these pictures turned out to be frauds, people still believe in the Loch Ness Monster. You can still, to this day, take tours to that lake in hopes that you're going to see the Loch Ness Monster. This morning, we are going to plumb the depths of a deep and murky subject. How can God be known? And how does that statement have anything to do with the paragraph I first read? Well, hopefully by the end of the sermon that will be evident. How can God be known? How, with what we have, can we know that God exists? And this question has echoed down the halls of time. That's not a new question. People ask it today. They have asked it for centuries, and has sparked a heated debate among scientists, philosophers, theologians, and many of us have asked this question ourselves. Yes, I believe, I have the faith, but, what evidence is there around me, around all of us, to prove that God exists? Just like peering into the gray waters of the Loch Ness Lake, Loch means lake in Scottish, by the way, just like peering into the murky waters, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famed monster, wondering, is there somebody that really does look back at us? Many of us cry out into the expanse of space and ask the burning questions. God, are you really there? And how can I know for sure? How can I know for sure? Now, many scientists today say, what about God? What do they say about God?
Most of them say that it doesn't exist.
That's right. Most say he does not exist, that he's a fable, it's made up, on and on and on. But they say God does not exist. Just like the Loch Ness Monster, right? People say the Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist, and there is simply no scientific evidence to support the claim of a divine designer guiding and directing our lives. They try to tell us it's false. We are believing a lie. It does not exist. So what are we to think? We here in church, every other Sunday, what are we to think when we believe that there's a God, and scientists will tell us that no, it's a myth? And if God can be known, how would that affect our lives? If you knew unequivocally that God existed, how is that going to affect us? So these are the questions for today, and I'm going to read from Psalms 19. Psalms 19. Now, what were the Psalms? I've asked this before. Psalms were what? Songs, yes. Songs that were written to sing, right? Who wrote the Psalms or songs? David. Yeah, David wrote, he didn't write them all, but he wrote a lot of them. And the one that we're going to read today, Psalms 19, is probably one of his more famous. Now it says here, according to the author, it's called one of the noblest examples of Hebrew poetry in existence. C.S. Lewis, you're probably familiar with his name, called Psalm 19 the greatest poem in the Bible. And as we said a minute ago, it was written by King David. Wow. Does anybody know at what point that this was written in David's life? Before I finish the end of that sentence, what was going on? Any guesses? That's right. Extra points to Elmo. He was on the run from who? Yeah, King Saul was out to get him, so he took his ragtag little army of like 200 guys, something like that, and they were hiding out in the desert because, crazy King Saul was out to get him. It was written originally as to be sung as a praise song. The Hebrew is graphic and stunning and shows David's deep love for God and his creation. And in this psalm, David answers the question, can God be known, with a resounding yes. Now I'm going to read from the Message version, the whole psalm, but I want to read from the NIV and see if this sounds familiar to you. Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, and skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, night after night they display knowledge. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Have we ever sung that? From the purple or blue hymnal, whatever you want to call it, in the bygone days, the heavens declare, his handiworks teach. Yeah, we sang this psalm as a song on during a lot of Sabbath services. But anyway, I want to read from the Message version. And what is the Message version? It's a version of the Bible that what? Modern English, yes. It says things in a little more modern way. So it may take some time to getting used to, but I like it because, as Rod said, it puts things in a little more modern way. So let me read Psalms 19 as David wrote it, but translated it to our time today. And this starts out, God's glory is on tour in the skies. Godcraft on exhibit across the horizon. Madam Day holds classes each morning. Professor Knight lectures each evening. Their words can't be heard. We don't hear audible words, and the voices aren't recorded. But the silence fills the earth. Unspoken truth is everywhere. God makes a huge dome for the sun, a superdome, bigger than any superdome here on earth. The morning sun, a new husband leaping from his honeymoon bed, the day-breaking sun, an athlete racing to the tape. That's how God's word vaults across the skies from sunset to sunrise. Melting ice, scorching deserts, warming hearts to faith. The revelation of God is whole and pulls our lives together. The signposts of God are clear, King David wrote, and point out the right road. The life maps of God are right, showing the way to joy. The direction of God is plain and easy on the eyes. I like that, easy on the eyes. The direction, or God's reputation, is 24-karat gold, bling. With a lifetime guarantee, the decisions of God are accurate down to the nth degree. God's worth is better than a diamond set between emeralds. You'll like it better than strawberries in spring, better than red, ripe strawberries out of the garden. That's a different translation. Yeah, but it puts the imagery in, phrasing that we're used to today. And it says, there's more. Wait, there's more. God's word warns us of danger and directs us to hidden treasure. Otherwise, how will we find our way or know when we play the fool? Clean the slate, God, so we can start the day fresh. Keep me from stupid sins. Keep me from doing stupid. From thinking I can take over your work. That I can start this day sun-washed, scrubbed clean of the grime of sin. These are the words in my mouth. These are what I chew on and pray. Accept them when I place them on the morning altar. O God, my altar rock. God, priest of my altar. So there's Psalms 19, probably like you've never heard it before. So let's continue. The question of whether God can be known has been asked for many times. It has been asked many times. Job 11, 7 through 8. Yeah, Job, that's a very interesting book. Job 11, 7 through 8 says, they are higher than the heavens. What can you do? They are deeper than the depths of the grave. What can you know? What can you know? Isaiah wrote in Isaiah 40:13, who has understood the mind of the Lord? In Psalms 19, which we just read in the entirety, God speaks of three types of revelations. Three types of revelation. In verses 1 through 6, God makes himself known through what theologians call natural revelation. Verses 7 through 14, God unveils himself through special revelation. And in the last verse, we have a messianic hint of God's ultimate revelation, the incarnation. Let heaven and nature sing. David grew up in the pasture of Palestine. Why did he grow up in the pasture? Because he was a shepherd. That's right. He was accustomed to having the most magnificent view of God's celestial handwork. Why was that? Why did he have such a good view? Yeah, no city lights. And when he wrote Psalms 19, where was he? Elmo? Out in the desert with, again, yeah, sheep. Oh, yeah. Well, he was guarding the sheep. Yeah. Yeah. But he was out in the desert where there is no city lights. And if there's no city lights, what? What can you see?
Everything.
Everything. You know, people that grow up in the big cities that go visit the country where they don't have so much light are just amazed by the stars. Yeah, you can see the stars. And it's amazing on a nice clear night, all the stars you can see. I remember we took a trip to Dubai a few years back. And there was something up there in the sky. I could not figure out what it was. I thought it was like a weird cloud formation off over this way. Finally realized I was seeing the Milky Way. I had never seen that before, and took me some time for it to sink in as to what that was. I think I saw a picture of the Milky Way somewhere, and I'm like, oh, that's what I was seeing, and I had never seen that before. David grew up in the pasture land. He was accustomed to having the most magnificent view of God's celestial handiwork. No city lights, no pollution. There was no pollution or buildings to block his view. He could lean back as the shepherd boy, prop his head up on a rock, and watch the stars and the moons and the constellations and planets do their nightly dance. One of those evenings, he took out his lyre and he began to sing songs of praise to the creator of the universe. He was so awestruck by what he saw in the stars at night. Luckily, we have that recorded in Psalms 19. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the works of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. What kind of knowledge? What kind of knowledge are they displaying?
Knowledge of God.
Yes, of a creator. Yes. There is no speech or language, and their voice is not heard. They don't make noises, or not noises that we can hear. I think we've talked from time to time about a far-off planet, and it's been a while since I've looked at that. But remember, it made like B flat. It was like a trumpet, a horn. It was sending off musical notes way, 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 way out there. And scientists were able to detect it with the type of wave it was giving off. But we don't hear. We look up in the stars, all of that we see, all the grandeur, but it's so quiet. They're not noisy. They're just there. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, though, is what David said. Even though they aren't audible, what they are saying goes out to everyone on this earth, to the ends of the world. In the heavens, he has pitched a tent for the sun, which is like a bridegroom coming forth from his pavilion like a champion racing to the course. It rises at one end of the heavens, it makes its circuit to the other, and nothing is hidden from its heat. The sun starts here and it goes here and then it goes there. And what happens the next day? The same thing, right? You know, it's not like on again, off again. Well, I wonder if it'll come up today. I wonder if it's going to go down today. I wonder what time it's going to come up today and go down. We know all that because it is just so regular in its appearance and disappearance. On Facebook, you know how people ask silly questions? Yes, I know. On Facebook, people ask silly questions. But somebody posed the question, which do you prefer, sunrise or sunset? Now, to me, I can't really tell that much of a difference.
They're both beautiful.
They're both beautiful, yeah. I mean, who's going to argue that one is more beautiful than the other? They're very similar. But like clockwork, unless, you know, it's cloudy and rainy, it happens every day. Every single day. Some observations from Pastor Williams. He says, number one, all of this is proclamation of a creation. David began with the heavens and the skies, proclaiming, declaring, and publishing the glory of the Lord and the work of his hands. This implies a very conspicuous, noticeable revelation. Edwin Lutzer writes, in creation, God went public. I like that. You know, it's like a stock offering where they go public. And what does that mean? Anybody can buy their stock. Yeah. Well, that's, to put into the business language, God went public. So everybody could see. It's as if David sees the heavens as a preacher standing behind the pulpit, announcing the glory or the weightiness. Weightiness. I don't know if I like that word. Importance. We'll go with importance of God. The Hebrew word for God in these verses is the basic title for God, the Creator. The Creator. From the telescope to the microscope, nature shouts the virtues of a magnificent God. You know, we talked about the heavens, but what about when you get a microscope and you start looking at things at cell level and all that goes on and the complexities of the cell, the building block of us and everything around us on this. You know, we're all comprised of cells. Different cells, yes, but we all have basic, teeny tiny little building blocks that make us us. 2, there is no pause in their song. Day after day, night after night, the heavens pour forth speech. The Hebrew word for pour forth is bubbling up. Bubbling up. And pictures a natural spring that continually gives a fresh water supply. Do you like to watch waterfalls? Oh, I do. Do you like to watch ocean waves? I do. Do you like to watch natural springs bubble up? I do. Where I grew up in West Virginia, Cemetery Ridge, West Virginia. I know you all have heard of that. But when we moved there, we didn't have what we later called city water. City water meant a water line, and we eventually did get that. But when I was a little girl, we got water from a spring that naturally bubbled out of the hillside. And we had a pump house. Anybody have a pump house growing up? You know what a pump house is? A pump house is a little house over a pump. Yeah.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah, who'd have thought that? But our water supply for, drinking water, for bathing, all of that was from the spring. So then as our family grew, I was the oldest of 6 kids, but one's different than 6. As our family grew, our needs grew, and my dad and his dad built what we called a cistern, big, just cinder block, concrete block, whatever you want to call them, structure that caught the water from the spring. from the spring and filled up the cistern. But the spring was very important to us because sometimes it got very, very hot and the spring would dry up. I mean, it did. So we had these great big metal barrels, and we go down to Cerrito, West Virginia. I know you've heard of that too. The metropolis of Cerrito, which is next door to the metropolis of Canova, Cerrito, Canova. But anyway, we had a flood wall there that they built. We had a really bad flood years and years before, and they built a flood wall. But they had some spigots there that you could use to get water. If anybody needed water, you could go there and get water. So when the spring dried up, my dad somehow would take the seats out of his car and put these big 50-gallon drums in the back of the car, and it was a really big deal, again, Cerrito, West Virginia, really big deal to go down to the Ohio River, drive through the flood wall, which is so cool, and get water. Because, you had to have water. And then when the spring came back, we were happy, or my dad was, and my mom, because we didn't have to drive down there to get water. But, the spring and the water that flowed, that was life to us. Life to us. All right. Number 2, bubbling up, and pictures a natural spring that continually gives a fresh water supply. Boy, if we had just had that spring all year. There is neither pause nor break in the concert of beauty, vastness, and steadfast order. Number 3, a pervasive declaration. Psalm 19 gives a pervasive declaration. Now, what does he mean by that? Although the creation is not endowed with the gift of speech, it doesn't talk to us, it doesn't use words, doesn't really make any noises, the heavens make a universal appeal to all the earth. Men have been fascinated by what they have seen. All the earth. The hand that made us is divine, the author says. In a choir of colors, patterns, light, contrast, shape, and the proportion, creation sings its praise to God. Sings its praises. The same moon that we see in our sky is the same one that people in Taiwan, Tahiti, and Tanzania see. All over the earth, we all see the same thing. There may be some variances, like when I said we went to Dubai and I saw the Milky Way, and I had never seen that before. But we're all looking at the same thing because why? The earth turns. The earth turns. The same stars that look down at us at night were the same stars that David saw and wrote about. The very same stars that inspired him as he wrote Psalm 19. John Calvin wrote, you might be familiar with that name, John Calvin, he wrote, "There is not a spot in the universe wherein one cannot discern at least some sparks of his glory. From Moscow to Memphis," now there's a contrast, "from Rome to the rainforest, from Albania to Antarctica, everywhere is the evidence of God." Number 4, star power. Beam me up, Scotty. There's no intelligent life down here. Is that what he's talking about? For the Trekkies in here? Star power. In departing from the poetry of his day, David sees the sun as a shadow of God's power and strength. David saw it differently. How did most people view the sun? Not as power of strength, but what? Something to fear. They encouraged its worship so they wouldn't do something to upset it. But to David, the sun was the greatest member of the heavenly choir. David pictures the sun as a newly married groom coming out of the wedding pavilion with great joy and radiance, or a runner rounding the bases of a celestial baseball diamond. Interesting analogy. The sun, the great circuit riding preacher of the sky, proclaims God's power, presence, and provision. Can we live without the sun? Absolutely not. And it's at exactly the right distance from us on this earth to do what it needs to do. Have you thought about that? If we were any closer, we would fry. If we were any farther away, we'd freeze to death. It's at the exact location that it needs to be. Now, how did that happen? How did that happen? Natural revelation reveals to us God's creative power and greatness, whether in the beauty of a sunset. God's creation is beautiful. Do you agree? Or the beach, or the mountain, or flowers, or the laugh of a child, or watching a puppy play, or a horse run through the field, or a snowflake. Do you realize how intricate each and every snowflake is? I don't know if this is true, but when we were little and in grade school, we made paper snowflakes, and our teacher told us, and I don't know if this is true or not, but she said, there's no two snowflakes that are alike. Is that true? Elmo's shaking his head. Yeah, you had the same teacher. The creation is shouting that there is something more. There is something more. The sights and sound of nature awaken in us the notions of glory and beauty and transcendence. Nature gives us a proper perspective of ourselves. The author writes, I still remember reaching the very top of a ridge in North Carolina and collapsing on a mossy outcrop of rock. When I caught my breath and my eyes focused, I was stunned. Growing up under the glare of city lights, I was not prepared for what I saw on the mountain that night. It seemed as if every square inch of the sky was full of stars. The Milky Way arched its way across the sky and provided me a glimpse into the universe's heart. I said nothing because there was nothing to say. I was speechless. I felt so small in comparison to the great expanse above me. The silence was deafening as the celestial choir echoed in my soul. David felt the same way. He wrote, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon, the stars which you have set in place. What is man that you are mindful of him? The Son of Man that you care for him. With all this greatness that I see, how are you so in love? How do you care so much about little old me here in Lexington, Kentucky? Or Cemetery Ridge, West Virginia? Or Detroit, Michigan? Or Moscow? Or all these other places? It doesn't matter where you are. You are mindful of me. Natural revelation leaves us without excuse, the author says. Because God has revealed himself through nature, humans are responsible for responding to this revelation with praise and thankfulness. When looking at a waterfall or sitting on a beach watching the endless rise of the crashing waves, or listening to a baby cry for its mother, God is whispering to us all. The Apostle Paul says that we are without excuse if we deny God's greatness. In Romans 1:18 through 20, Paul wrote, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven. I don't like that word wrath. I don't like, that's a particular translation that was used, but wrath makes it sound like he's angry and hateful and vengeful. But anyway, continuing, we'll say the greatness of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppose they suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain, because he has made it plain. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. So men are without excuse, says Paul. Natural revelation is so clear, so obvious, and understandable that we have no excuse if we not deny him, but we continue to do so. The notion of suppressing the truth is alive and well in our culture. The scientific antagonism toward God is nothing new. With the theory of evolution being taught as fact in some of our public high schools, young people are learning to deny the obvious, that in the beginning, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning what? God created the heavens and the earth. The story is told that Napoleon overheard some of his men arguing about whether God actually created the world. He stopped their debate with a grand sweep of his hands, asked them what they planned to do with the evidence of the sky full of stars that were shining down on their ship. Napoleon said to his men, "Okay, how do you explain this?" Natural revelation through creation is just a start. Do you realize this is just the beginning? The creative order proclaims God as creator and magnifies his greatness and his power. This type of revelation speaks to man as a creature. The problem is that instead of answering our questions, it propels us to deeper questions still, like, so why is all of this here? What is behind all of this? Why am I here? What is my purpose? To live and die? Is that it? Is there more? Why is there suffering? Oh, now we're getting to the hard questions. Why is there suffering? What does the future hold? What is the meaning of life? John Piper states, "I believe nature is the prep school, readying them to delight in God." So what does that mean? He says this is just a taste. This is prep school. This is kindergarten. This is just to introduce us to what happens later. Solomon agreed that we want to know more than this created world can tell us. It's just a taste. Just a taste. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. It's in Ecclesiastes 3. If we just had natural revelation, we would be aware there is a God, is a powerful and strong creator. But John Calvin wrote, this might very well lead us to worshiping the creation instead of the creator. Have you thought about that? And people do worship the creation. Because of the effect of sin, we're not able to rightly interpret nature's display of God's strength, and history is cluttered with people groups who worship the sun and the stars and the mountains and everything else. And another problem with all of this is the consistency of natural revelation. We see it every day. It's nothing special. It's there all the time. It has been there just like it is for thousands of years. And we can expect thousands of years more of the same thing, day after day and night after night. This revelation provides a backdrop for our lives. You know, if you're in your house and somebody comes running in, everybody, there is stars out, the moon is out, come and look at this. And you'd be going, are you all right? You know, happens every night. Maybe you ought to sit down here. Are you feeling okay? When I was in high school, he continues, I had a friend who lived by the airport. When I would go to dinner at their house, he said it was unsettling. And why was that? Well, living by an airport, you have airplanes. Every 10 minutes, a jumbo jet would roar over top of their house just 50 or so feet above the roof. I would jump when the windows rattled and the furniture seemed to sway. And you know what? The family that lived there, they ignored it. They didn't even hear it because they were so used to it. And I can add a personal story to that. When I met Jerry, his family lived right beside a railroad track. So one day his dad's sitting there in his easy chair reading the paper, and here comes this big freight train thundering through. How many feet was that thing from your all's house?
About the length of that wall to this wall or the car.
Yeah, it wasn't very far. And a freight train, I mean, it would be booking through there and just, you know how trains are, rumbling and shaking. And his dad would be sitting there with the paper, and all at once the paper would do like this. And nobody said anything, and his dad didn't stop reading. They just, they didn't hear it. Like living under the flight path of the jumbo jets. It was such a common occurrence that they didn't hear it. Didn't pay any attention to it anymore. They lived there so long they could no longer hear the airplanes. Just like the Jeffers, they didn't really hear the freight train. As impossible as that seems, they simply stopped hearing the sound. The same can be said for humans who are surrounded by the most amazing miracles of nature and seem to be deaf to the lavish language of love for their Creator. Two men were standing at the Grand Canyon. One man exclaimed, "This is the hand of God. I am amazed." The other one said, "Well, I'm amazed too. That's the first time I ever spit a mile." Natural revelation, just seeing all of this, is not sufficient to bring us to God. Can God be known? Yes, though He created the world, but even more so, through His Word. Francis Bacon said there are two volumes to life: the book of nature and the book of Scripture. To begin to understand, you must read both. Understand God gives way to worship when he realizes the greatness and the grace of our God. I want to close today with a video that I saw the other day. Does anybody here watch The Big Bang Theory on TV? Yeah, they just ended it after 12 years. And it's a comedy about a bunch of scientists out in Pasadena, California, I think is where they are. And the star of the show is a guy named Sheldon Cooper, who is very, very brilliant. And this is a comedy, but he's very, very strange. Yeah, he's really strange, but he's brilliant. Well, anyway, there's an offshoot of that series. It's called Young Sheldon. And this clip is of young Sheldon, and basically it's Sheldon from that show as a young boy. And if you watch Big Bang Theory, Sheldon's mother is part of the series, and she is very, very religious, and Sheldon is not. So this is a conversation between young Sheldon and his mother when he was just a little boy. So if you'll play the clip.
Can I sit with you?
I think Mommy needs to be alone right now.
All right. Mom, I'm scared.
Why?
You didn't go to church. You stopped saying grace. I don't understand what's going on.
It's kind of hard to explain.
Is it me? Did I do something wrong?
Of course not. Come here. Sheldon. Faith means believing in something you can't know for sure is real. And right now, I am struggling with that.
So you don't believe in God anymore?
That isn't something for you to worry about. I need to figure this out myself.
Can I help? Maybe I could provide a fresh perspective.
I don't think so, baby.
Did you know that if gravity were slightly more powerful, the universe would collapse into a ball?
I did not.
Also, if gravity were slightly less powerful, the universe would fly apart and there'd be no stars or planets.
Where are you going with this, Sheldon?
It's just that gravity is precisely as strong as it needs to be. And if the ratio of the electromagnetic force to the strong force wasn't 1%, life wouldn't exist. What are the odds that would happen all by itself?
Why are you trying to convince me to believe in God? You don't believe in God.
I don't, but the precision of the universe at least makes it logical to conclude there's a creator.
Baby, I appreciate what you're trying to do. But logic is here, and my problem is here.
Well, there are 5 billion people on this planet, and you're the perfect mom for me. What are the odds of that?
Thank you, Lord, for this little boy.
I knew I could fix it.
Oh. Maybe it was you and the Lord.
I don't like sharing credit, but I knew in that moment it wasn't the appropriate time to say it.